Hello and welcome back to our Wednesday live edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines as we're back to talk a little FSU spring football, recruiting, baseball, a little bit more. I am joined by the owner of the Osceola, Jerry Kutz, managing editor Bob Ferrante, and our resident guru of recruiting, Charles Fishbein. And actually, Fish decided he did not want to join us, so Fish, we're going to let you back in, I think.
We got to reel him back in, guys. We got to reel him back in.
Yes,
I don't know what happens,
job.
man. You guys have like me on like some short, thing that you just drop out the bottom on me, guys.
Well, hey, listen, it could have been me. Sometimes I hit my computer and that little.
Hey, Fish readers want to know, can you play that piano?
No, I'm definitely not that good at music.
And you've been repping a lot of socks wear the last couple of days.
Yeah, my hair's a mess, so I got to wear a cap. I don't look as good as you guys, man, without the cap on.
Well, listen, I'm getting the 1970s territory with my hair. I'm gonna tell you what, it is. It's quite a lot. But I'll wear a hat Friday, and I'll wear a Braves hat just to offset your Sox hat. But all right, guys. So go ahead, Bob.
No, shout out to the White Sox and Pedro Grifol, the manager of the White Sox. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. They got their what they started out the year as. So
I know they won on opening day. They beat the Astros, and it's good for Pedro, the FSU grad who gets his first MLB win. So good for them.
I'm gonna be honest. I wear the Sox hat because I coach my son's baseball team.
Oh, that's right. You did tell me.
But he is a Tim Anderson fan, so I had to buy him this Southside, like fancy, like throwback, jersey that it's pretty cool. But I'm not really a Sox fan. I grew up a Yankee fan, to be honest with you. So.
Well, one of my favorite movies is about the White Sox. What? Whose fan did you say you were?
A Yankee fan. I think I just upset. He must be like a Red Sox fan or something. The way
hopefully you've converted, and we'll accept a Marlins fan or a Rays fan.
Dude, the Marlins are not a team, man. Except like once every 8 years when they decide to play for it all. But other than that,
I thought the captain was going to get them turned around.
Yeah, no, he didn't. He left already.
All right. So, all right, Fish. So we'll let you wear your Sox hat since you are the head coach of the South Florida Sox, whatever y'all's name is down there in South Florida. And hey, listen, do you play your son at shortstop and pitcher?
He plays basically like anywhere in the infield he wants and pitcher. He had a game. He actually had a game the other day where he came in 4 pitches, 3 outs. So that's what you call efficient.
Yeah, that is very efficient. All right. Well, listen, have you started sending his recruiting tape everywhere?
No, I'm not one of those dads. I actually tell everybody he's not that good, and hopefully somebody likes him.
Undersell, over deliver.
Exactly.
It's the key to doing good business. Yeah. All right. So, guys, we are coming off a Tuesday practice at Florida State. We're going to Fish and I are going to talk some recruiting later. Jerry and I are going to talk a little bit about the passing of a dear friend of ours, Coach Dave Van Halanger, who was a longtime strength coach for Bobby Bowden, played for Bobby Bowden, but we'll get into that a little bit later, and obviously finish his career with Mark Richt at Georgia. But, guys, Bob, we'll start with you and Jerry. We were all three at practice yesterday. I don't want to say it was toned down because it was a full padded practice. But it was certainly a shortened practice by a couple of periods, not by much. But, Bob, just kind of some of your key takeaways coming off the second scrimmage, kind of some of the players who stood out to you.
Yeah, I don't think Tuesday was maybe the cleanest or best scrimmage, especially from an offensive standpoint, although we've seen Jordan Travis be very, very consistent. He's executed at just a very, very high level. The practice closed with a very long, Pat, we joked it wasn't a 2-minute drill. It was like almost like the 4-minute offense. It was a prolonged drive where I think it was just maybe giving the offense a feel good kind of. I think also, Jaheim Bell has really stood out for what he's offered on the field, just his versatility. He's a guy who can line up just in so many multiple ways as a tight end out of the backfield, flexed out, in line. He can block better than I think we had maybe thought he could coming from South Carolina. We've seen a lot of multiple tight end formations there. That's really, really intriguing to see what a guy like Jaheim Bell can do. And again, with the running backs, we've been consistently very happy with what we've seen. I know Alex Atkins has praised that group, from Trey Benson all the way through to CJ Campbell, who, if you watch CJ Campbell run in practice, you will say that's a really good running back. And then if somebody said, well, that's a walk-on, they just kind of, brought him in just to see what he could do to build depth to the room. You say, that doesn't look like a walk-on to me. So that's really a good sign when I think top to bottom, your position group, say at running back, is really that deep.
Yeah, and I agree with you on CJ. He has looked really good. He looked good last year. He looked good in some games he played in early, coming back from injury. And obviously a guy that provides probably unexpected depth at that position where you're already deep. And I need to go back and see what offers he had out of high school because, I don't know if he chose to come to Florida State because he had academic money and all of that. And he always wanted to come to Florida State. I don't know the whole background on his recruitment and how he ended up here, but clearly there were a lot of people that missed on him if they did not offer him because that is a guy that could play Division I football. There's no doubt about that. And of course, I know that in our practice report we notated how far Trey Benson's come in the pass game. Now, obviously they've rotate a lot during the season. You're going to get more catches in practice than you will in most games. But anyway, they did. We talked a little bit about that in our practice report. He had another strong day, and of course, as you said, Jordan Travis had a strong day. Jerry, you were there all day yesterday, checking it out on a beautiful, warm spring Tallahassee day. As we got a chance to watch a little bit of batting practice and football at the same time. So, what were your key takeaways from yesterday's practice?
Well, I was going to say that the practice opened in the IPF with the offense scoring at will almost in goal line. I mean, they scored three out of 3 or 3 out of 4. And it was a tremendous start to the day for the offense. And I heard the coaches commenting on that, great start, as they were running off to the next period. But, again, one of the things that I want to help condition our listeners, they're in pads, but they're not, this isn't like a game situation to me. Right. It's full speed, but it's not full contact. And sometimes you can get a false take on what you're watching. When we got more into the practice later, the defense dominated the practice, I thought, in my mind. I thought I thought they pretty well controlled the scrimmage and the 11-on-11. It wasn't really a scrimmage. But again, you've got Adkins, who's cross-training offensive lineman. He's got Maurice Smith resting. He's got a guy in there at center, the transfer from Colorado, who's never played center before. And those of you guys, and Pat, I know you know it, Bob, you know it. In spring, the offensive line, if you got your right center in there, your starting center in there, he knows every check call of the defense. And he's going to put that offensive line in the right blocking scheme, to neutralize it. Well, when you got a brand new center in there, a kid who's never played the position before, that's harder to do. And so I think you're seeing not only is this defensive front good, but they're going against an offensive line that Adkins is not trying to win the practice. He's trying to win the 2023 season by cross-training guys at every practice. And so you don't have the continuity or the center check calls that you would normally have with a fifth-year senior in there at center.
Yeah, and plus, to your point, Jerry, if he's never played center before, learning to play essentially one-handed at the start of the play is difficult to do, and not just anybody can do it. It's you're trying to move forward with one hand and both your feet while you got one arm going backwards. So now,
and you got to be accurate.
But yeah, especially if the guy's in shotgun, right? I mean, we see all the time snaps get rolled back, snaps get throughout college football, throughout pro football. So it is a very difficult more difficult transition than most people understand.
I will say, Roddick's been accurate. I think his snaps have been mostly consistent. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I think. There were some struggles early on the first week when he first got there. I think Bob and I noticed that he had a couple of bad snaps one practice. But listen, when you got it's hard to do learn on the run when you have Fabian Lovett or Darrell Jackson or Josh Farmer, since you got to go block after you snap the ball. So and make sure that nobody gets to Jordan Travis or Trey Benson or any of the offensive skill guys. So anyway, but yeah, and
just to condition the reader that what's being reported from the practice field is, I don't say take it with a grain of salt, but don't take it as gospel.
Right. Just understand that it's not 11-on-11 tackle football. It's 11-on-11. Sometimes it's what they used to call thud or whiz, where you're basically tagging off on a player. What they're trying to do is they're trying to teach the defense how to come to balance and while keeping everybody safe. But anyway, what they normally do, and what we saw a lot yesterday, was a little get to the ball, come to balance, get to the run or tag off on a type of thing. So,
and to keep in mind, Pat, as you know, just to finish your thought there, the runners don't stop. They're going to score.
Right.
Their running back coach is saying score, even after they've been two-hand tagged.
Yeah, just like yesterday, Kenton Portier made a catch down the sideline, fell out of bounds, and still had to get up and run to the end zone.
That's not a touchdown. That's not a touchdown.
No, with Mike Norvell's enthusiastic help. So, that's true. They are teaching the guys to run throughout the play, and so. But listen, again, I think the point was a lot of skill guys look good. We saw, two young guys in the early parts of 11-on-11. We saw Brock Glenn make a tight window throw to Dre Jacobs. They look like but the skill guys, I think, really did have a good day based on what we saw yesterday. And of course,
and that name, Dre Jacobs is he's just stood out to me this spring as being just different. And I don't know what kind of coaching he had in high school, but he breezed through I don't know if he breezed through it, but he looked good in the tour of duty drills I saw. And he makes plays that you don't expect from a kid that is should be getting ready for the prom.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that we are, like we mentioned it before, we're talking about these early enrollees just about every time we write a practice report or talk on Seminole Sidelines about what's going on at practice. And, it's quite amazing that some of these, listen, I think that everyone would have thought coming into this spring that if one of the true freshman receivers was going to be a standout, it was going to be Hakeem, just because he looks to be more physically developed. Maybe not technically or positionally developed, but certainly more physically developed. So I think Dre, because as we've said before on the show, he was so slight, we thought it might take him a year to adjust to major college football, the physicality, the getting worn down, those type of things. And he has shown up just about every day they've been on that practice field.
Yeah.
And of course, listen, I thought that looks like, there's a couple offensive linemen that stood out to me yesterday, particularly in pass protection, was Jeremiah Byers. They go through this basically 2-on-2, 2-on-3 type stunt twist drill where they're passing defensive linemen off. And Jeremiah Byers continues to impress me in that phase of the game. Bless Harris had a good day. And I think we're starting to see, as Jerry said, they're always shuffling guys around. But what we do know is that they are, Mike mentioned after the scrimmage that they went 50 plays with the ones, 40 with the twos. And so my take out on that is they are starting to develop, see who they want and see where. Now we're, obviously it's not a lot that we can talk about there. We don't talk about depth chart, just see who we talk about who we see play where, but not where they are on the depth chart. That's a lot. It was a very complicated set of words to try to say, apparently. Sound like maybe I'd have been the happy hour, but I have not. But anyway, so it was a good practice. Fun to watch them as always. A little bit less physical than we've seen and I think that was by design, right?
Coming off of the scrimmage.
They're coming off a Saturday scrimmage, and you're getting ready to go into a Thursday practice where the players get 3 days off. So my expectation is that they kind of went a little bit easier than they would have otherwise, because they're probably going to get after each other a little bit on Thursday before they take a 3-day break for the Easter holiday weekend. Bob, you guys were here last year. I believe they had the same exact schedule: Tuesday, Thursday, 3 days off, come back. Is that what do you remember? Is that what they did last year as far as putting more of a workload on that Thursday before they have a 3-day weekend?
Yeah, I think so. That's my memory. And these aren't the most ideal schedules that you're drawing up for spring practices, because you've got to accommodate a spring break and guys want to go home for Easter. It isn't the way you would kind of map it up and draw it out. But I would say we've talked about this a couple of times. These practices are much more physical this spring, probably longer practices than we can remember in past years too. So these, maybe because of depth, that's why these practices are just a little bit tougher, a little bit more 11 on 11. I think somebody asked, after practice Tuesday night, did you do more 11 on 11, today than usual? And Mike was pretty quick by saying, yeah, I wanted to see that. So that's kind of a good thing too.
And then the reporter asked why. And he said, because I just felt like it.
Because I am the head coach of Florida State
University.
He has the opportunity now with this depth. I think that's the underlying statement that he maybe didn't fully underscore too. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's something we had talked about coming in the spring, and something I think one of you guys might have asked Mike in his spring press conference because of the depth. Will you practice more? And that was a question I had certainly, and it turns out that it that's what I wasn't here last spring, but it certainly seems to be more physical than I remember the last time I saw a spring practice, which I believe was 2021, which we didn't have access to all of them, right, because it was still COVID. So we got to go to the scrimmages back then, right, because they were open to the public to try to get some unofficial visits on campus, because they couldn't meet with the kids, so they did want to see the kids to be able to see the stadium and the team practice. So anyway, I think we'll see a more physical. I think we'll see a much more physical practice on Thursday than we did Tuesday before they take a 3-day break. Jerry, now you guys talked to some players and coaches after scrimmage. What was kind of the feel after not after scrimmage, after practice on Tuesday?
I'll go first. I interviewed Byron Turner, and my first impression was he was really nervous. It's a kid that hasn't been, I guess, interviewed much. Nice guy. Very. He speaks well. He knows. He's not afraid to interview, but you could tell he hasn't done it much, and so that was from a human interest standpoint of intrigue to me. Some of the things we talked about was, his injuries have held him back some. When he got here, he came with an injury. He thought he could play through it. It acted up, so they had to do some surgery on him. And then last year, he was, starting off to have a year and had an injury. And so he's overcoming some injuries. I asked him about what's the biggest challenge for him, where he sees, where does he see his improvement? And he said his biggest challenge is transitioning from the run to the pass, or the pass to the run. And that's what he's working on. But he's a guy that factors in at a defensive end, and I think he's right now in good health and stacking practices together to help him get better. Got to watch. I think Florida State needs him to develop.
Yeah, and I think that was going to be the harder transition for him, was practice. I mean, going against the run because he's a guy that still needs to grow physically. I mean, he's still, my opinion would be undersized for a defensive end. So I think I think that's where most of his improvement is going to come, is versus the run. So I agree with what you're saying there and what he said. Bob, what about you?
Yeah, CJ Campbell talked for a few minutes, and Pat, I thought it was interesting. You mentioned where he had been recruited by coming out of high school. I think he had a couple, maybe 2,000-yard seasons over in the Panama City area. He had an offer from Davidson. So maybe, again, a high academic kid who decided to come to Florida State. And like you said, probably had the bright futures opportunity in coming here to defray some of the college costs in Tallahassee. He's just talked about his opportunity and his development. I think I look at him a lot, and not exactly a body type like a Trayshawn Ward, but the storyline comparable to a Trayshawn Ward is a guy who's just worked really hard and fit in quite well in that room. I think we all kind of marvel maybe at that running back room, just how they all seem to get along despite there's only one football to carry around. And yes, Trey Benson's going to get a lot of carries, but there are other guys who are getting opportunities and improving in pass protection, getting a chance to develop. So CJ's a guy I think we like a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike was asked the question about why the team seems to get so excited when he has a big play. And in his answer, Mike said he's an unselfish kid. He's a person that is very unselfish, and his teammates just, are drawn to him. I know when I saw his film his junior year and senior year, I couldn't believe he wasn't being recruited. I thought his tape was as good as the tape I saw. And here's a kid who's an A student and the president of the student body at his high school. I mean, kids are drawn to him, whether they're football players or regular students. So, and to body type, Bob, you guys know I'm real big on hips, thighs, and ass. And Ward did not have any of that. I mean, Ward was a really slight kid. I mean, very surprising that he was effective and as durable as he was. CJ is exactly the opposite. CJ is one thick dude. I mean, he carries his weight in his lower base, and I think he's going to be a powerful, explosive runner.
Well, first of all, I did not know that Jerry was going to turn this into the Seinfeld Ass Man edition of Seminole Sidelines. So I know what Florida State personalized license plate I'm getting Jerry for Christmas. It's going to be Ass Man. We're all going to
You guys were losing me till Jerry just told me he likes ass and legs and stuff. So
all right, so listen,
that's where all the football muscle is, man.
To get this back on track. Yeah. All right, and Fish will agree with me on this. And we're going back to CJ Campbell. It's very easy if you're not just a home run prospect when you're in the part of the state Panama City is. North Florida to listen, colleges do not get as much bang for their buck coming into North Florida as they do flying into Tampa and Orlando and Miami and Jacksonville. It's that stretch between Pensacola and Tallahassee, and really Pensacola and Jacksonville is kind of out of the way unless it's not populated with a ton of Division I prospects. I can remember 10 years ago working for Scout, and I'm watching a kid named Raekwon Jones from one of the Panama City Mosley, and I've known Jeremy Brown, his high school coach, forever. And I walked up to Jeremy. I said, who is that kid? Kid didn't have an offer. And so I started calling some coaches I know, and next thing you know, he's signing with Indiana, ends up starting for them. Was not a great player, but a kid that was definitely and so I do think, and Fish, you can speak to this, it is harder for a kid that is not a bona fide, and I hate to use the term 4 or 5 star, but it's not a bona fide, legit, this kid can absolutely positively play major college football, he can get overlooked at a place like that. Is that not correct, Fish?
Yeah, just that area. I felt like Florida State for years neglected west of Tallahassee. And you look at a Devon Witherspoon who went to Illinois. He's from Pensacola area. He's going to go in the first round of the draft this year. I've always felt that area, there's a lot of hidden gems. I mean, Clemson got a tight end out of there a couple years ago out of either Niceville or Navarre. So there's top talent. It's spread out. You can't hit a lot of schools. You're going to spend more time than you are. So unless you're one of those schools in the Southeast Conference, like a Mississippi State or Mississippi, maybe a UAB that's in Conference USA, those schools that are close to that area, Mobile and Pensacola are severely under-recruited, and there is a lot of talent there. I think there's guys that you see it all the time. I think there was like 4 or 5 years ago, the Green Bay Packers selected a kid out of Pensacola that had to go JUCO, and he ended up at Arizona State. So there's plenty of talent over there. I think Norvell and his staff has done a lot better job. You see guys, you're seeing more and more guys. You saw last year with Jabril Rawls. Yep. You saw with Darius Washington. They're putting an emphasis on recruiting over there. So I think that as these guys start doing more and getting more exposure, listen, if guys start hitting on a higher rate out of there, schools will start recruiting over there. You start getting guys going to Illinois that are going in the first round, schools are going to start going, wait a second. They're doing it at Illinois. Why can't we do it? So,
yeah. Well, you know what? I think that's a perfect time to transition into recruiting, which is going to be a part of this. Got a couple of things, Bob. Oh, well, first of all, Bob, if you want to stay with us for recruiting and Dave Van Halanger, you're more than welcome to. But if you need to go, I do want to ask you the most dreaded question on the show today. What happened at Dick Howser Stadium last night? Florida State extends its losing streak, and it's not getting any easier with Clemson coming in this weekend. I didn't get a chance. I watched batting practice during football practice, but I did not see the game. What's the state of affairs over there?
You know, it's tough when you give up a grand slam in the first inning and your starter doesn't make it out of the first. That's maybe not the formula to break a 9-game losing streak. But I thought after that they did relatively well settle in from a 4-0 deficit. It's tough to come back from that when you don't have the lineup that's raking it and your defense is still not supporting the pitching. But unfortunately, you strand the bases loaded in the 9th, and it just can't get that big hit to come through for you. So unfortunately, it is 10 straight losses. I don't know what to expect from Florida State Clemson this weekend. It's always been a good baseball rivalry. It is 2 first-year head coaches held in very high regard in Link Jarrett, coming over from Notre Dame. Eric Bakich coming from Michigan. He's obviously had a lot of success up there. I think they know each other pretty well. I think they know their tendencies. Jimmy Bellinger, the old Florida State pitching coach, is Clemson's pitching coach. So some familiar faces to everybody. And it should be a really good 3-game series, again, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because they don't want to play on the Easter holiday on Sunday.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a nice weekend. It's beautiful. Well, it's supposed to be beautiful weather. But yeah, so Bob, now I do have one last question before you go. Are you going? And speaking of recruiting, are you going to miss me on Saturday?
Just a little bit. The camping chair has made it so I don't have to sit on the bench out there. But I think you'll enjoy the Masters, and I might enjoy the sofa. So yes.
You think Chris Neal will miss me on Saturday? All right. Well, I will miss everybody on Saturday, but I would like to take a second to thank Mike Norvell for allowing us, as far as we know, not to have to get down there to cover recruiting, because right now we do not think they're going to have any unofficial visits this weekend because they're releasing the players, and I'm pretty sure the staff's got off. But anyway, yeah, Bob, I will miss you guys on Saturday. I will somehow manage. You know what? It's going to be disappointing. The Masters has got some bad weather coming this way. It could get rained out on Saturday. I don't know what I'm going to do. I might just go down and sit at the Moore Center just for the hell of it.
No.
Stay away.
See who shows up. Yeah. All right, Bob. Well, thanks for joining us. Fish, let's dive right into it. I got a couple things I want to talk to you about. Let's start with the commitment of Jalen Parrish, 6'2", 210 pounds, an inside linebacker from Delray Beach Atlantic High School. And we got ironic that we have Jerry on here because Jerry is the linebacker guy.
He loves He loves the linebackers.
Of course, I would like Jalen pulled me away from the national championship game because he waited until 10 o'clock on Monday night to commit. So I'm bothering Fish. And but anyway, we got our eval up. But Jalen Parrish offers from FSU, Auburn, UConn, FAU, Kentucky, and USF. Fish to say he's lightly recruited would be accurate. Does not have a tremendous amount of offers, but he's a guy that you've actually seen in person. I've watched film on him a couple of times now. Just first of all, your thoughts on him and where FSU goes now. Do they need another linebacker with this class? Anyway, just talk about your impressions on Jalen. You've actually been around him in person.
Yeah, I think they're going to still take 2 or 3 guys at the linebacker spot. We talked about the Booker kid out of Warren High School. He's more. I think after you saw his picture, you're going to see the same things I see, that he's more of an outside linebacker than a traditional defensive end. Parrish is a good player. I know fans on the message boards and everything get a little upset with some of these takes like this, but like I said, most guys don't know how to play linebacker anymore. They don't really play it in high school. This kid is a traditional inside linebacker. You see him going downhill. You see him playing the position how it's supposed to be played. Is he a super athlete? No, but some of that could be made up if you're got good instincts, you're a smart football player. You could overcome some of those limitations athletically, which I think that this kid's the case. Another thing is I really like Delray Beach Atlantic High School because a lot of these guys, they're very good athletes. They come from good parks as far as Pop Warner parks. This is a kid that comes from a program that produced at the college level. Virginia Tech used to do really well at this high school. He's a very good backer. Like I said, he does have some limitations as far as athletically. You don't want to put guys in space with him where he has to cover guys a long time. But that's the situation with most linebackers. If you find a linebacker that could cover tight ends and wide receivers, he's going top 10 of the draft because even the NFL is looking for those guys now. I'm sure Jerry will probably tell you some of the same things after watching his film.
Yeah, listen, here's the thing. All right, so I think the reason he's under-recruited or has not been – he will start getting more offers now that he's committed to Florida State than he ever thought of. That's going to happen. So that'll resolve some of the whatever that people – I mean, first of all, they're worried way too much about rankings and where he's rated and this, that, and the other. You got to trust the coach's eval. They won 10 ball games this year by bringing the people that fit this program, both physically and off the field. So you got to give until they prove that they can't do it. You got to give them the credit they've earned. Secondly, all right, so maybe he's not a dynamic athlete, but he's athletic enough to play running back at his high school, and maybe he can't line up and cover a Micah Pittman or Winston Wright or Ja'Kai Douglas, but he's certainly a guy, at least based on my evaluation, that looks like he could line up and cover a tight end. He looks comfortable in zone coverage. Looks like he knows where he's supposed to be, who he's supposed to be looking for. He's also listen. I know an old coach who told me about linebackers. If he can run and he's willing to hit, I can teach him everything else. The only 2 requirements this coach had for a linebacker, you got to be able to run and you got to be physical. You can't be afraid to hit. And this kid is a physical kid. He closes on ball carries very quickly. I think to your Fish point, he is still learning to play the position. I'm not going to say robotics, not the word I'm looking for because he's not, but it's, you can still see that he is trying to pick up the nuances of the game and the position. But listen, I think he's a guy that can line up inside the tackle box and make plays outside the tackle box. There has not been a ton of that around here. We saw it with Tatum Bethune. He's got the ability to do it. Deloach, he can do it, but certainly is a guy that can line up, as you said, as a traditional inside linebacker, especially if you were to go to a 4-3. But a guy, I don't know if he's a sideline to sideline player, We'll find out if he can run that well. You just don't see a ton of it in his highlight tape. There's not a ton of highlight tape, but he certainly looks like a guy that can line up in the middle of the field and get outside the hatches and to the numbers and make plays. I don't know if he can go outside the numbers. We'll find out about that. You got to be really fast to do that. But anyway, listen, I thought it was a good take. We'll see. Time will tell. We see a lot of kids that come in here highly acclaimed and never sniff the field, and then you see guys that are under recruited and end up being one of your better players. So we'll see with Jalen, but I like the pickup, particularly since they did not have a linebacker in class, and it is a position that really does need to be fortified with depth, in my opinion. I think Fish and Jerry, you would both agree with me, but Jerry, I know you've got a chance to see him. You've put his highlight package on the message board the other day, and kind of what stood out to you about him.
Well, I mean, what you guys said, I agree with all of that. I think I'm excited about him because, one, we need linebackers. Two, he meets exactly the criteria that Randy Shannon has articulated that he looks for in a kid. His size for being a junior in high school is pretty damn good. He's shown as either 6'1" or 6'2", 210. And if he's anywhere close to that, that's a kid that could appear on campus at 6'2", 225.
Yep.
So you get him in the program, and he could become a very solid 225-pound linebacker, which is basically what you're looking for. There was very little film on him on running plays, but when he has the ball in his hands, the little bit of clips I saw, he can definitely change direction.
Yep.
And that old linebacker coach you're talking about, who said he wants him to be able to run and not afraid to hit, he also came to find out, if he didn't know it already, that change of direction is important as well.
Yeah.
Because we saw some linebackers who, when the ball went to the sidelines, you could see the whole Florida State bench clearing because, it was like a bowling ball that couldn't stop.
Yeah, I know a couple of those guys you're talking about.
Yeah, we've had a couple of them.
Yes.
And so, I see a kid who's got enough athleticism to be an inside linebacker. But is he a Marvin Jones or that ilk? Probably not. But he's a lot better than what we've been signing.
Yep.
And I don't mean I'm talking about we had some years where we didn't sign anybody.
Very lean.
And the other thing is he's a Florida kid. He's as Fish said, he's out of an area that produces some good players, so we need to be recruited. So I'm pleased, and the more of these kind of kids you can sign at the linebacker position, obviously the deeper you become.
Well, and here's what I like about it, and like I said, time will tell if whether he turns out to be a good player or not a player. But listen, what we tend to forget is we see what I like about it is they're offering as he's going into his senior year. We see a lot of kids get offered early in their junior year. They commit for whatever reason. Maybe a kid that hasn't been recruited but develops more than that kid, the junior that got offered. This kid may take strides as a senior that the kid that's committed as a junior does not take. Sometimes it takes kids longer to develop. We're seeing that FSU is offering offensive linemen that have been under-recruited through their junior year. Now you got a guy like Ty Hilton that's got a FSU offer. More programs have come in here. We saw the same thing with Derek Plaz. Derek was growing into his body as a junior, has gained about 40 pounds since probably not 40, but probably about 30 pounds since the start of his junior season. Florida State offered him last week, and sometimes I think you're just better off to have that patience and not get so in a hurry to over-evaluate a kid who's still not done developing, and some kids do take that next biggest step. but going from their junior to senior year. So, listen, I don't see anything wrong with the signing, and I wish more colleges would play the little. I know it's hard. I know the recruiting cycle's moved up. Once other people start getting commits, you feel like you've got to get the commits. You feel like you were going. If you don't sign a guy that's shown his potential as a junior, you're going to get passed by as a program. I'm not sure that's always right. I think that you need to kind of, if you can play the slow game in recruiting, sometimes that's better. But anyway, Fish, the one guy that we did not get to talk about last week that I want to talk to you about was the decommitment of Keyshawn Mashburn. I know that you had put on the message board that you think that Florida State could possibly find their way back to Keyshawn. I don't know that I mean, I know it's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't know if I agree with that, but just your thoughts on his decommitment and why you think they could end up going.
Well, I mean, one, you don't know what type of season you have. If they underachieve, all of a sudden, guys that you thought you had a shot, it may be someone that just has a great senior year, and then all of a sudden schools start recruiting him again. He's a defensive tackle. They're unicorns. I mean, I have coaches always calling me, hey, do you have a left tackle and do you have defensive tackles? They're not calling me about wide receivers very often. I mean, if you could find guys that are interior guys, we don't know what this kid's going to look like. I mean, his junior film was not I thought he was good enough to be a Power 5 kid. Are there guys that are better than him? Sure there are, but I would never count out that they may not come back on him. Yeah, they parted ways, but you just don't know how that kid's going to develop. You look at the two kids that are on FSU's roster right now from Gadsden High School, or one of them went to Maryland. They never even recruited him out of high school. And to be honest, Daryl Jackson. And you look at the other kid that came from the same high school. Daryl Jackson was a lesser of the recruited guys, smaller, and then all of a sudden he goes to Maryland and he's blown by the kid that's at Florida State and is going to start this year. So you just don't know what's going to happen with these guys physically, especially linemen. They can improve so much in 1 year. He could have 3 or 4 good games at the beginning of the year. Some of the guys Florida State wanted at the D tackle position all of a sudden choose other schools, and you're in a position where guys are coming off the board and you're like, you know what, let's go back on them. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying it wouldn't shock me to see them go back on this kid.
You're right. People do circle back. You're right. It's a process. That's why they call it a process. But yeah, listen, I hope it works out however it played out. I hope it works out best for both parties. And if it's best for Keyshawn and Florida State for him to be back in Tallahassee next fall, that's great. But, obviously, I know there was a lot of back and forth on the message boards about why decommitments happen. And listen, they happen on both sides. They happen from the players decommitting for on the field and off the field reasons, and schools choose to quit recruiting players for the same reasons. We'll find out how this shakes out, but there was a lot of back and forth on the board about, why would you let him decommit? Why did he decommit? But it happens from both the school standpoint and prospects. We've seen it's happened as long as recruiting has existed. Like you said, they could work their way back to him. Let's move on to someone that we know they are actively recruiting that was on campus yesterday, and that is 5-star safety KJ Bolden. I don't know if you got to read any of his he's been on campus several times, Fish. I don't know if you got to read the interview we had on KJ this morning on the Osceola, but just your thoughts on the importance of getting him on campus again, because I know you're a big proponent of, hey, you got to get him on campus at least 3 times. By KJ's count, he believes this is his 3rd time. But he was here for 2 days, got a chance to meet individually with Adam Fuller and Patrick Sertan and Mike Norvell, had his mother here, got a tremendous amount of he's got offers everywhere, you name it, Alabama, Auburn. I know he's already got one official visit set up to Ohio State. He's still waiting to make a decision on the 4 others, but just your thoughts on KJ.
I mean, KJ's an elite player, but Florida State has a lot of sell. They have a great history of safeties. Jerry's seen a lot more of them than I have, but they've had a lot of great ones from Derwin to Butler. to all the guys. Carlos played there before he played running back, but they've had a ton of safeties that have had a lot of success at Florida State. A lot of these kids, we've talked about it. They like Florida State. They needed to be given something to hang their hat on. The 10 wins last year puts them in the ballpark. Like I said, now that this kid's been on campus a third time, and now it's been a 2-day visit, I think Florida State's probably in this top 2 or 3. You just got to follow what they're doing, not what they're saying. If they come on visits multiple times and they say they're coming back again, I think he said he's going to come back on campus again. Florida State's got a legitimate shot. They have playing time. Kids want to play there. And the system that they have allows safeties to make a lot of plays. So he'll have the opportunity, if he comes to Florida State, the opportunity to probably step on the field relatively early. I mean, you never know with early kids. We thought Sam McCall would be one of those guys who would get on the field early, and other guys did before him. So you just don't know. But the talent's there. He's a big-time prospect, probably one of the top 2 or 3 safeties nationally. You look at the offers, USC, Alabama, Georgia. Look at what has changed in the last 2 years. FSU's now going against the big dogs. And the only way you have a shot is you got to put your line in the water, and you have to go after these kids. That's the only way you'll know if you really have a shot at them or not.
Yeah, and we are talking about KJ Bolden, the 5-star defensive back prospect from Georgia. He was on campus for 2 days, and we have an article on theosceola.com or at floridastate.rivals.com. But some of the more interesting comments, listen, recruiting's a funny thing, and I'm sure there's a reason specifically he is not being as detailed as maybe some people asking him questions or fans would want him to be. But he had some interesting quotes. He's only right now got an official visit set up for Ohio State, so he's got 4 others to use. And he might be close enough to Florida State that he doesn't feel like he needs to use an official visit to Florida State. But he made the comment that Florida State has just always been my dream school. I feel like everything about Florida State is perfect. I think the other thing that he said that was interesting, and I'm not going to read the whole quote. I'm going to kind of paraphrase it. He's talking about his meeting with Mike Norvell and his family, particularly his mother, and that everything he was saying, talking about Mike Norvell, KJ said, everything he was saying was real. When I looked at my mom's face, she was shaking her head. She really doesn't do that a lot. He got her approval, so I like that for sure. So, and he also said that his mother wants him to make the decision, but it is a family decision. And what's not in the article is I asked him, well, how big a role will the family play? And she goes, well, 25 to 50%. I don't know how to quantify that. But anyway, he's a kid that is going to rely on his family, as most kids do. But certainly he's got 4 other official visits to plan. He was headed to Alabama and Auburn this week after he left Florida State, and says he will announce his official visit list on April 29th or 30th. So that's coming. But based on what he said, Fish, you got to think Florida State's going to get an official.
Yeah, if Mama likes him, Florida State has not done well with some moms over the years. We could go back to Fred Rouse's mom and some other guys. Jerry will probably tell you. Eugene Hayes, I think, was another one that, like, the mama was not pro Florida State. So if Mama likes you, you got a real good shot at landing a kid, because this seems like he could say, well, it's not really, it's going to be my decision. But from the quotes you brought up, it seems like Mama is going to have a big part of this decision. And the fact that she liked what Norvell was saying has to be a very good, it's music to Florida State's fans' ears.
Yeah, well, listen, we know that is a factor with some kids. We've seen it with Cam Davis's mother. She seems to have a really strong bond with not only Mike Norvell but David Johnson. She's active on social media, and listen, KJ said he's going to rely on his family to help him make this decision. So I think that is a good thing for Florida State, and was interesting to hear him make those comments. All right, Fish, another guy that was on campus. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch his film, was offensive tackle Jordan Floyd from Lilburn, Georgia, Parkview High School, 6'6", 295. When we went out to practice yesterday, he was the most noticeable thing on the field not dressed in pads. He stood out. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch him. But,
back in the day, there was a thing called cow tipping. This kid was tipping some cows. I mean, like, he's nasty. Just really, I mean, he was tossing guys like all around the field. It's just straight up like hip tossing guys. I think he has a pro career in wrestling if football doesn't work out. I mean, honestly, he was impressive. Big kid. The one thing, and we keep talking about this, they are not recruiting small linemen anymore.
Not.
The days of the 6'3", I mean, I know the Daniels kid from Pensacola is an undersized tackle, but the guys are looking at 6'6", 6'7". They're starting to look at like how Clemson's been, the Ohio States, the Floridas, the Alabamas, the SEC schools, Auburns, and that's what they're recruiting. And this kid's just another big kid that can move, and he's versatile enough. Another kid that could play right or left tackle, move inside a guard, kick inside. They like to cross-train these kids. Here's another guy that fits the description of what they're looking for in an offensive lineman.
Well, and listen, I watched his film. He is huge. He is physical. He's really raw. He's got a lot of, he's a basketball player. I think he's been converted to football. I believe last year, if it wasn't his first year as a football player, it was his first year as a starter. Needs a ton of time in the weight room. Very raw fundamentally. Has not scratched the surface of what he could be as a football player. There's no doubt about that.
You can't coach that mean streak that he has. Like, that's something we've talked about it. Coaches don't mind that a kid's technique's not that good. That maybe they're not real strong in the lower body. Yep. They want these kids, because what happens is if you get a fully polished player, and this is what happens with so many guys, and I'm sure Jerry can tell you about this, is once a kid's fully developed, they're hard to coach. They think they know everything. You can't really break them down. These offensive line coaches like guys that they can break down to the bare bottoms, build them back up. And if they have the physical talent and they can bend and they're athletic and they can move laterally, they're coachable and they're willing to get in that weight room and work hard. Everything else could be taught. Technique could be taught. You could teach things. And that's where these guys are looking. They're looking at those certain traits. Hey, if they have all these traits, we could coach up the other part. And this kid has the tools.
Yep. Listen, he's another guy that doesn't have a ton of offers. FSU, Mississippi State, Pitt, Maryland. He'll get more offers as he continues to develop. I think he's a kid that they will probably continue to evaluate, see how he develops as a senior. And then I think the other thing, because he is so raw, I think that you got to measure his want to, right? Somehow, some way. Whether it's in conversations with him, how important is football to him? How important, how badly does he want to play? But listen, you understand after seeing him on the foot, why they're interested in him. And again, to your point, he doesn't have any bad habits because he hasn't played very long. He is a raw piece of clay that Alex Atkins can certainly mold. But kind of reminds me. A little bit of Rod Orr, maybe another kid that played basketball, really athletic, really long. So we'll see how it goes. But anyway, you certainly noticed him at practice yesterday, and he is a huge kid. It looks like he's even gotten bigger since the end of his senior year, based on the film I saw and seeing him in person. Then, of course, the last piece on recruiting Fish, FSU offered a JUCO corner, and I'm going to screw up the name. I'm going to say Zion Lally. He plays at the College of San Mateo Junior College. They've offered a lot of cornerbacks in this class. So I was a little bit surprised when I saw they offered a junior college cornerback last night. I throw on the film this morning, and he might be one of the favorite cornerbacks that they're actually recruiting. The kid is long at 6'2", about 180. Boy, can he flip his hips and run. He's extremely fast. I think we've talked a little bit about this off camera. 10.8 in the 100 meters, runs a 400. Very comfortable and physical playing press man coverage. Looked to have good ball skills. I really like the offer. He's got USC, BYU, Utah, several others. What did you think of Sione Lee?
Yeah, when it comes to JUCO guys, I usually lean on a good friend of mine that covers this, also has a recruiting service which he sells to the universities. he had this kid as a number 1 corner in junior college next year, said that the league that they play in California, I think the Jayhawk League, which is, the Kansas JUCOs, he considers that the best. This kid's in kind of that same type of league, big, physical, pretty much just plays man coverage from my understanding, hasn't played a lot of any other coverage, but he's a lockdown kid, feels that the kid can basically step in day one and contribute. So I think from everything that I've heard and the person I lean on, this kid would be a big time get for them, especially at the corner spot. And we talked about this. Randy likes big, long, athletic corners. You're going to see less and less of the 5'8", 5'9" guys as long as he's there and has his input. He likes guys that are 6 feet and above, and this kid fits the bill.
Randy never saw little buddy play. I think Jerry probably knows who I'm talking about.
Clifton Abraham.
That's right, little buddy can play. But yeah, listen, I like the offer. I hope they can get in on him, because I agree with your guys' evaluation. You don't see guys that can run like that, flip their hips like that, have that kind of length and straight line speed on top of all that. But anyway, I was very impressed with this film. It was fun to watch this morning. Another good offer out. We'll see how it goes. Like, you got to get them all the way across country, and there's a lot of good schools between here and there. So we'll see how it goes. And you can guarantee that the offers from USC and Florida State have come this week. I would only imagine that if you followed his Twitter account the next 2 days, he's probably going to double the number of offers he has, which is about 8 right now. And then you said he was an excellent student on top of all that. So
3.9 GPA. Yeah. He's a December grad, so he's going to be able to come in. That's huge for these JUCO kids. That he could come in January, be part of a spring practice. These are the type of players that guys are looking for now. So
after I saw his film, I was hoping maybe he could come out in May of this year. But I did some research, and I got the same information that you got, that he is a December guy. All right, Fish. Well, we appreciate you joining us. If you want to hang on with us, you're more than welcome. But Bob, I think you're coming back with us, I believe. Is that correct, Bob?
It was great talking to you guys today.
All right, Fish. Hey, next week, new hat.
All right, no problem. What do I got to wear?
Braves.
All right.
Not Yankees. All right.
Go Yankees. Bye.
All right. Well, bringing Bob back in, got Jerry here. Jerry, there's some times we have to talk about things that are not as positive and as we want them to be, but we all lost a dear friend earlier this week on Sunday. Former FSU strength and conditioning coach Dave Van Halanger passed away in Texas. A little bit of a surprise to everybody. I believe he was either 68 or 69 years old. I've known Dave Van Halanger since I was 15 years old. One of the first people I met when I moved to Tallahassee. Just one of the nicest men you'll ever meet in your life. I can always remember walking into his weight room at that time in Moore Athletic Center. It was more like a box than it was a weight room. And Dave was obviously a huge man, 6'6". Probably when I met him, he was in great shape, 250, 260. And I would walk into his weight room, and in his big booming voice, he would say, "My full name is in the right weight room," and he'd put me to work when I was in high school. But a guy that played for Coach Bobby Bowden in college at West Virginia, was one of Coach Bowden's first hires here at Florida State when weight room became more and more important, and a guy that had a lot to do with the development of Florida State football players in the dynasty era, on the field and off the field, and played a valuable role on Saturdays, was up in the press box with binoculars as an extra pair of eyes for the defense, helping whichever defensive coach for a long time was my father up there. But anyway, heartbreaking news about Dave Van Halanger, one of my favorite Florida State coaches. I got a chance to see him at Coach Bowden's funeral. That was the last time I saw Coach Van. But just your thoughts on Coach Van Halanger, his impact as a man on other people, and obviously his impact on the program itself.
Yeah, so Pat, everything you said, Dave came here in '83, and he was instrumental in establishing not just the weight program in the tiny little room that he had, but instilling what Coach Bowden believed in. He had played for Coach Bowden at Pitt. He was recruited by Coach Bowden there. And he knew what Coach stood for. And it was just who he was and how he could implement it. Very consistent with Bobby's vision. And that was, we're going to work hard, but we're going to have fun. And we're going to be very engaged in our players' lives. And as I called around to everybody that I interviewed for that story, they all said the same thing, that Dave he understood being a football player. He had been one. He was a 4-year Yep, 4-year starter for Coach Bowden at West Virginia, and played a short while for the Atlanta Falcons before injury. But he knew what football was. He knew what it required, and he had some knowledge of strength and conditioning, but in 1983 there wasn't a lot of that. It was still pretty new, strength and conditioning in the football program. So he had the technical knowledge, he had the football knowledge, he had knowledge of what Coach Bowden was looking for, and those things were important to building the dynasty. He came in 83, I think about the same time your dad came here. Your dad came in 83 or 84.
Yeah, after 84 season, yep.
Yeah, and so David had only been here a year or two before Wally got here. But we got stronger as under Dave. But the thing that all the people that I spoke to about Dave, they all talked about him as a person. And that, he was a guy that when your position coach was down on you,
yep,
and if you were ready to go home, that you could go speak to him. And he was always available, always accessible. I talked to Clint Purvis for about a half an hour yesterday before practice. And by the way, Clint is going through a procedure today, so everybody keep Clint in your prayers. Clint called, who was our team chaplain for years, called Dave his best friend. And they were roommates on the road when we traveled. And he talked about that Dave had a really fundamental love of people, and that he had a faith-based life, but that he was always a lover of the players, and tried to be extremely involved in their lives. So, yeah, I think that was the key to Dave. And the thing I think that you have to understand for the younger fans who maybe don't, or maybe even for some of us older guys, he was here all the way through the dynasty. And he got here in 83. The dynasty started partly because of his work in the strength room. And not only his work in the weight room, but his results in the weight room encouraged recruits to come here, right?
Yep. And you talked to one of those guys that he totally rebuilt from the time he got here and had a huge impact on his life. He chose to follow Dave into what Todd Stroud. You talk about the word
rebuild. When Todd got here, I remember Todd was the short, fat kid. Really.
Yes, he was. I've seen the freshman picture.
He was. You wouldn't have recruited him, honestly. No. I mean, but he just totally transformed his body. Very dedicated to the weight room, and Todd had wonderful things to say about Dave. Of course, Todd is the defensive line coach at the University of Miami right now. So, he knows of what he speaks, and he was a strength coach at Florida State for a short while before going back into position coaching. But what I was going to say is Dave was instrumental in starting the dynasty in '87, but he coached all the way through the 2000 season. And honestly, Clint told me this yesterday, he had no intentions of ever leaving Florida State until Mark Richt got that Georgia job. And Mark came to him very much like Brad came to your dad when Brad moved to South Carolina and recruited Dave and said, Dave, I can't do it without you. I need you, you know?
Yeah.
And Clint said that, you know, Dave was taken back by it. He had no intentions of ever leaving Florida State. But Mark, who had gone through a Christian conversion after Pablo's death, was Dave Van Halanger, was his mentor as a Christian brother, you know.
Yep.
And so they were very close. And so, you know, I'm sure Dave prayed on it, but it didn't look like Florida State really needed us, you know, and Mark did. And so he went with Mark to Georgia. And they had really good success at Georgia.
I think he was there till 15, through the 15th season, if I'm not mistaken.
The last couple of years, he was a player welfare.
Yeah.
Not a strength coach anymore. But, you know, Dave was very instrumental in our dynasty run and in Mark's success.
Yeah, the thing that stood out to me about him, and of course, most of my memories of him are as a young, you know, teenager in my 20s. First of all, he always made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. There's that be where your feet are type thing.
Right.
We all talk about it. We all want to do it, but we all don't do it. Dave Van Halanger was the guy that was where his feet were planted. And I don't care whether it was me walking into his weight room as a 16-year-old high school player. He always had time for me. Anytime he always had. It was not always about what your workout was going to be. It was about how your day was going. How's your transition to Tallahassee going? You know, those kind of things. He took a personal interest in everyone that he came across. And I know in part of your article that you have in remembering the FSU family, you remember Don Acosta, who I don't believe Don played football, if I'm not mistaken, but he was working in the athletic department, and I know that he was a guy that has a fond feeling for Dave as well.
Well, yeah, Don was struggling his freshman year, and his parents told him, you know, he needed a counselor. So he went to a counselor, and the counselor said, I know this guy. He's really a good guy. You need to meet him, and he's the strength coach at Florida State. And he went and worked for Dave as a volunteer, and, you know, about went into the profession. Most of the guys on that strength staff did go into the profession. Don's a financial advisor today.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, listen, Don and I were fraternity brothers, so some of our struggle may have been that we were in a fraternity. So that might have helped both of us out. Get away from that. Bob,
maybe you should have worked for Dave in the strength room a little more, Pat.
We
all could have used that.
There's no doubt there's evidence of that now. Bob, just your thoughts on Coach Van and what your memories are of him. I'm sure you got to spend some time around him.
Yeah, I spent some time here and there, but, you know, most of my years were as an editor, you know, back at the old Tallahassee Democrat. And I do remember Steve Ellis would walk in very excited when he had sheets of paper. I believe, Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they were handwritten in pen numbers from various players. So this takes you back to, this was not you're getting a printout with all these numbers that were, you know, typed into an Excel spreadsheet. This is, but you got to see. Yeah.
So there were strength test results.
Yeah.
Is what Bob's talking about. And when Dave got here, I can remember Steve was working for the Osceola at that time. And they would do this strength testing, and we were allowed to come in there and cover it. And Dave would give us, we were shocked when he first handed us the these little sheets with every player, everything that they had done in the strength testing compared against the previous strength test. So in the fall, you got fall results, but it showed you what they had tested in the spring. And he did it for, a lot of reasons, but I think one is that it motivated the players. They didn't want to see those strength numbers. Well, first of all, they wanted to be the strongest guy in their segment. But they also, from spring when they tested to fall when they tested, they wanted to have an increase in strength, between the testing periods. So it was a great motivation to keep everybody working hard, but it was a reward for the guys who did improve their numbers. And man, that was competitive. Pat, you were probably in there sometimes during those testing periods. Guys really got after it to try to make those numbers big. Now, I can tell you that's probably the thing that our listeners who are old Osceola subscribers, they may miss that more than anything else.
Well, I was getting ready to say it was always one of my favorite things that came out in the Osceola every year, especially before I got to Tallahassee when my father had just taken the job. And I think I've told you this before, my only connection, there was no internet. There was no learning about Florida State from my father. He was half the country away, or more than that, 3/4 of the country away. There was one telephone call a day typically. If I was at home, I got to talk to him. If I wasn't, I didn't. So I learned about Florida State football from the Osceola. I read it he sent it to me every week. But anyway, that was always when I can remember when I started working for you. It was one of my favorite articles to work on because you would let me to do the data entry. I'd write it up, and so. But I listen. I wish we lived in that same simpler time where, but you're right. He did use it as a motivational tool, just like coaches in college football programs used to use the two deep as a motivational tool. There were no oars in 1988 on a two deep, but and I think it would work today. If they use that kind of stuff as a motivational tool, right? Those listen, you didn't want to, as a player, you didn't want to be embarrassed if you knew it was about something, if it was going to be published. So you're going to get your best effort. And I can remember it was a very big deal to go in the weight room, and they had the Garnet Club and the Gold Club, and
they had the T-shirts.
Oh the big Seminole with his chest sticking out, and
with whatever club you were in, based upon weight that you achieved.
Yeah, and in fact, I think Keith Southwood, who is a guy that we interact with in our Thursday night happy hour, online happy hour. He was probably I know he was in the 600-pound squat club. I don't know what they called it, but yes, you had all those boys. I'm sure they still do in weight rooms. I'm sure they still have the they used to have the Victors Club. If you played winning football that particular week, you got a Victors Club T-shirt, all that. But yes, that was always I didn't back then. It was just normal, right? I mean, if Josh Storms was to give us that information today, I think we'd all three pass out.
Yeah,
from shock.
Well, I don't know if it's Privacy Act and HIPAA and exactly what it is, but what they do when and listen, let's be honest. Bench press and squat and all that, I don't know how much of it really translates into football. No. What really translates is the work you put in together as a team.
Yeah.
And that's not measured in, well, I think it is measured to an extent when you see the whole team getting stronger. That tells you that everybody's working hard. But I don't know, maybe I don't know if it's HIPAA or it's I don't see anybody publishing it anymore.
No. Listen, I think it's all not it's hard for people that are reading information and not seeing information or seeing what's happening. I think things like that are interesting.
Absolutely. It really does. It was very great reader interest. We thought we found gold when we got it. We were the first to ever publish it. When Steve went over to Democrat, he brought it over there, and we didn't have the exclusivity to it that we did at one time. But You know what's more important to me than the strength from what the interviews I did was, Kes McCorvey said that Van Halanger was the first person who ever said, "I love you."
That sounds like something Van would say for sure.
And Kes said the first time he said it to him, he blew him off. Kes thought, why do you say that to me? But he would say it after practice or, in the weight room.
Yeah, well, listen, it's hard to find anybody that does not remember Dave Van Halanger. If there's somebody that doesn't remember him, finally, I can't find him. I mean, every time I've spoken about him this week, all I hear is that big booming voice and that he was always positive. Mm-hmm. You've talked to me about how Coach Gladden never has a bad day. Coach Gladden is one of the most positive people you've ever been around. I would put Dave Van Halanger in that. I mean, I don't think I ever saw Coach Van have a bad day. I really don't. If he did, he shelved it till he left the office. He never had one in the weight room. Like I said, always had time for people, the players, other coaches. I know he was part of that big running group that back in the day, you would see Florida State coaches running together. They'd pass by the Osceola building as they finished off their run down Pensacola Street.
As we were finishing off a Big Mac.
That's right. We'd be pulling back in from Jim and Milton. Here comes Wayne McDuffie, Mickey Andrews, Billy Sexton, Wally Burnham, Dave Van Halanger. I can't remember.
And I'd say, and there was another group that would go over and play racquetball, and would be Bob Royne and all those other guys.
Chuck
Amato and Bernie Waxman. And I can remember Goins saying to me one day, he walked past me, and Deckerhoff was standing there with a cup of coffee in his hand and a cigarette in his mouth outside the Moore Center. And Goins says to me, "If that guy outlives me, I'm going to be really pissed off."
Well, and he's on pace.
But hey, let me say this last thing about Dave. He had his first heart attack at 37. It's a congenital issue that he had. And it was, pretty major. It was right before we went to the Fiesta.
It was in Phoenix.
Yeah.
It was in Phoenix.
I thought it was here in town, but
I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But it was right around the bowl game. And, that was a pretty massive heart attack. And I believe that Dave probably lived on borrowed time. He got 32 more years out of his life.
Yep.
And I think the positive guy that he was the day that he had that heart attack, it just probably was a daily reminder that tomorrow's not promised.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, listen, he is a guy that impacted so many people's lives. You mentioned Kez. We talked about Todd Stroud. Mark Salva, Don Acosta. I mean, that's you. Yeah, me. Listen. He had he was a. I knew if I got into that weight room, Coach Van, I was safe from all the other coaches in that building. So that weight room was a safe haven for me when I was running around there at 15. But hey, listen, like I said, Coach Van was. Always made me feel like I was welcome in the weight room. As long as I wasn't interrupting one of his workouts, I was allowed in there anytime, and I could go into his office, that little box of an office he had in that,
tiny little
in that weight room. And I was so happy for him when he got the new weight room. But listen,
so Clint Purvis tells me the other day he would go meet with Dave in that little office, that little box for lunch, and they'd have a little, prayer session every day. So one day Dave told him, he said, "I'm going to bring lunch tomorrow, Clint. I got it." And Clint's a big man, right? You all remember Clint as the chaplain on the sidelines. He's a big guy. He says, he's got Twinkies running through his blood veins. And so he knows I'm coming in here and Dave's bringing the lunch, and I'm probably going to get like a roast turkey sandwich with a slice of lettuce, no mayonnaise. And so he gets in there, and Dave is all excited about his lunch. And he hands Clint his lunch, and it's a baked potato. No butter, no sour cream.
Yeah.
Just a baked potato.
Well, listen. I think the funny thing about that story is Dave Van Halanger could say that he had Twinkies running through his blood, and it would not be said with any malice. It would be said in such a way that it was you understood that it was said out of love, and that it was like he was talking like you're talking to your little brother, right, or to your big brother. You can say things and Dave just had a very easy way of being able to give people a hard time, but
I think that's exactly what the baked potato was for Clint. It was a message.
right, and and listen, I think he did it. He said those things out of love, right? And cared about Clint and wanted Clint to be healthy.
Best friend,
right? All those things. So listen, but the way the way Dave made fun of people in that way, or not making fun, but he had a way of saying things like that where you would not take it personally, right? Right. So, and I saw him do that with multiple people. The way he interacted with his players like that, other coaches. But he had a really good sense of humor. But I mean, he really. But anyway, listen. Our prayers go out to his wife Michelle, his daughters Danielle, Julie. I know I'm forgetting a couple of the kids' names. They were
Matthew.
They were really young when I was a teenager.
And then he adopted. He did the same thing as Mark Rick did, where they adopted some children from Russia.
Yeah, and listen, I know the family said that at some point there would be a memorial service here in Tallahassee for him. I would imagine that they will give. I know they told us they would give us an update. We will obviously make that known when we know about it. And I got to think that will be something that will be well attended by the former players that are still in the area. And obviously people like you, I, and Bob, who have gotten to know Dave very well over the course of the last 30-something years. I don't know how many years it's been since 1985, but that's when I first met the man. And listen, it's just hard to time moves very fast. And, we've seen more of this happen than we'd want of late. I can remember thinking that, I live a half mile from Coach Bowden's house, and I still think, I never thought, I thought he'd outlive me. And, it's sad to see the guys that helped make Florida State what it is, slowly that number is becoming reduced, and it's hard.
Well, that just means, Pat, that you're living. You're living.
That's right. And listen, and
it's inevitable. I mean, I'm blessed to be here as long as I have. Now, hey, let me just put this into some perspective, and that's that I don't live in the past. I mean, I love the past, but I think the past gives us a perspective on the present.
Right.
And so as we talk about these things, one, we want to honor the people of the past who built the brand, but it's valuable. The perspective is valuable to today, and what we're seeing from Josh Storms and from Mike Norvell and from the current players who are going through, their growth as children. The Kes McCorvey, who'd never been told "I love you" by man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, listen, there was only one Dave Van Halanger. There's no doubt about that. He was. You are not going to confuse that man with anybody else. So from a physical stature standpoint, personality standpoint, he was another one of the FSU coaches that was one of a kind, and there were several of them, and still are several of them. But he was one of a kind, and a guy that I think when we start seeing things like this, we all I wish I'd talked to him since the Coach Bowden's funeral. And I wish I'd done a better job of just dropping him a note over the years while he was at Georgia. But you always think, well, you'll run into somebody at some point. You don't ever do that more times than not. But anyway, listen. Heck of a guy, one of our favorites, and the world will miss him. We pray for his family, as we know they're going through an unbelievably tough time. As you can tell, it's touched Jerry, it's touched me, it's touched all the former players that he talked to. So you can only imagine the impact this is having on his family. But we will notify everyone when we know more about the memorial service that will take place in Tallahassee, when, where, and who will be there. So, guys, I hate to end on a sad note, but we will be back on Friday. with more news on Florida State football. We'll have a Thursday baseball game out of the way against Clemson. I think it's a 6 o'clock first pitch, if I'm not mistaken, Bob.
8 o'clock Thursday.
8 o'clock. Oh, 8 o'clock. Oh, it must be an ACC network game.
Yep.
All right. And anyway, listen, we hope you enjoyed the conversation, even the memories of Coach Van, which are sad for us, but he is leaving a very strong legacy behind. Hundreds and hundreds of kids that he has impacted over the course of his lives, and of course the coaches they work with also will take away lessons they learned from Coach Van. And then, of course, we hope you enjoyed the updates on spring football and recruiting. We will be back on Thursday. If you are not a subscriber to the Osceola and just listen to our podcast/videocast, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. We've got a ton of information, practice reports, recruiting reports, article on KJ Bolden, who was just here for 2 days, evaluation of Jalen Parrish, who just committed to Florida State, baseball news, softball news, and, of course, Jerry's got his tribute and the former players' tribute to Dave as we got the news on Sunday. But we will be back on Friday with another 12:30 live show as the schedule stands now. And Bob and Jerry, I want to thank you guys for joining us today and talk with Fish and I. And, of course, I want to thank our listeners, viewers, and, of course, our subscribers. And we will be back on Friday at 12:30. Have a great Wednesday and Thursday. And if you're a golf fan, I know you're all fired up about the Masters. We'll talk a little bit about that on Friday. You guys have a great
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. Happy Easter. We get to do that Friday too. So, all right, guys, have a great one.
All right. Good job.